Once upon a time, in a small village nestled in the foothills of a mountain range, there lived a young woman named Rose. She was kind, intelligent, and hardworking, and she was beloved by everyone in the village. But her life was about to change in a way she never could have imagined. One day, a messenger arrived in the village, bearing news from the royal court. The king and queen were seeking a bride for their son, Prince Alex, and the royal court had chosen Rose as one of the potential brides. Rose was shocked to hear the news, and she wasn't sure what to do. She had never thought of herself as a potential bride for a prince, and she wasn't sure if she wanted to leave her home and family to go live in the royal palace. But at the same time, she couldn't help but feel curious about Prince Alex. The royal court sent an emissary to the village who told Rose about the prince. He was said to be intelligent, honourable, and strong, and he was eager to find a bride who could be his equal. As Rose listened to the emissary's description of the prince, she couldn't help but feel intrigued. Maybe, just maybe, Prince Alex could be the one for her. But she also knew that there were many other women who were vying for his attention. So she decided to test her feelings by meeting the prince in person. When Rose arrived at the royal court, she was greeted by Prince Alex himself. He was as handsome and charming as the emissary had described, and Rose couldn't help but feel her heart flutter. But she also noticed that the prince seemed distracted, as if his mind was elsewhere. The prince led Rose on a tour of the palace, showing her the grand ballroom, the lush gardens, and the magnificent library. But as they walked, Rose could tell that Prince Alex's thoughts were elsewhere. Finally, she could no longer hold her curiosity at bay. Rose asked the prince if something was troubling him. Prince Alex hesitated for a moment before replying. He explained that he was to be crowned king in a few months and wasn't sure if he was ready to take on the responsibility. Rose was surprised by the prince's honesty and admired his humility. She encouraged him to share more about his concerns, and they discussed them together. The prince seemed relieved to have someone to talk to, and he began to open up to Rose. He shared his worries about leading his people through difficult times and the burden of responsibility that rested on his shoulders. He also spoke of his fears that he would not be able to live up to the legacy of his father, the previous king. As Rose listened, she began to see a side of the prince that few others had seen. Rose assured him that he had not burdened her, and that she was honoured he had shared his thoughts with her. She promised that he could always speak freely with her, and that she would always listen with an open mind and heart. The prince looked at Rose with gratitude in his eyes and thanked her for her friendship. The two of them continued to talk for hours, and as the sun began to set, Rose realized that she had completely lost track of time. It was then that she knew for certain that there was something special about her connection with the prince. It was more than just friendship, it was a bond of mutual understanding and respect. And, though she didn't want to admit it to herself just yet, she knew that she had begun to develop feelings for the prince. The next day, Rose couldn't stop thinking about the prince. She found herself daydreaming about their conversation and about the future that might lie ahead. And as the days went by, she began to realize that her feelings for the prince were growing stronger. She knew that this was something that she could not ignore, and that she had to face it head on. Finally, Rose decided that she had to speak with the prince again. She made her way to the royal court and asked to be granted an audience with him. To her surprise, the prince agreed to see her immediately. When she entered his chambers, he greeted her with a warm smile. Rose took a deep breath and confessed her feelings to the prince. The prince too admitted that he had come to care for her deeply. Though it was not proper for a prince to have such feelings for a commoner, he could not deny them. Rose felt her heart swell with joy, knowing that this was something meant to be. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of happiness for Rose and the prince. They spent every moment they could together, getting to know each other better and growing even closer. But as time went on, the reality of their situation began to set in. The prince's advisors were pressuring him to end their relationship, and Rose knew that it was only a matter of time before they would be separated. One night, the prince called for Rose to come to his chambers. He looked worried and explained that his advisors had convinced him that their relationship was not appropriate and that he must put an end to it. Rose's heart broke, but she understood his duty to his people and assured him that her love for him would never fade. The prince, moved by Rose's declaration, took her hands and said that he could not give her up nor turn his back on his duty. He had decided to abdicate his position as prince and renounce his claim to the throne. He would marry Rose and they would start a new life together, away from the pressures of his title. Rose was stunned by his decision, but knew it was made out of love. She asked if he was sure, and the prince confirmed that he was surer of this than anything else in his life. They made plans to leave the royal court and start a new life. They found a small cottage in a quiet village and settled into a simple but happy life. The prince worked as a farmer, and Rose began writing stories about their adventures. They were content to be away from the hustle and bustle of the royal court and spent their days in love and contentment. Years passed and their love continued to grow. But one day, a messenger arrived at their cottage with a letter from the royal court. The king and queen had passed away, and the prince was now the rightful heir to the throne. Rose and the prince were faced with a difficult decision. After much discussion, they decided that he would go to the royal court and be crowned. The prince was crowned and set about making changes to the kingdom, known as a just and kind ruler. However, he always felt a tug on his heart, knowing that Rose was back in their cottage, waiting for him. One day, after many years had passed, the prince decided that he could not bear to be apart from Rose any longer. He told his advisors that he was abdicating the throne and returning to his cottage. There was an uproar at the royal court, but the prince would not be swayed. As he approached the cottage, he saw Rose waiting for him on the front step. She was as beautiful as ever, glowing with a light that came from within. They embraced, and he knew in that moment that he would never want to be anywhere else. They would live out their days in that cottage, growing old together in love and contentment. The end.